Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm so grateful that you've chosen to be here today with us. My name is Priscilla Guaso. If we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, I serve as your founder and CEO of Latinas Rising Up in HR. We're a growing global community of Latina HR professionals who are rising in their careers, leading with heart, and trying to open doors for others. I've spent nearly 2 decades working across corporate and nonprofit HR for many years. One truth has never changed. When moments of uncertainty hit our communities, HR is always on the front lines. And just as we've seen in the last 5 years, remember COVID, remember the racial justice uprising with George Floyd, HR is always trying to find ways to be that bridge. And so we're here today to be that even further. We're in the thick of heightened fear, complexity, especially when it comes around immigration laws and ICE enforcements here in the United States. And more often than not, professionals as Latinas in HR, we carry the weight of it all. And it's really hard. That's a reason why many of us came together today to share and to build and bring community together more than anything. We're showing up as protectors, translators, listeners, leaders, advocates, you name it. And sometimes we're trying to do it all at once. And so today we wanted to hold space together, grow together. And that way that this fear that's coming towards all of us, we know that it will not do any, we'll be able to overcome it as one community. And what our employees are facing and what you are facing is real. This is not a fantasy, unfortunately, but there's things that we can do. And that's why we're here. We're excited to have this space at Latinas Rising Up in HR, where we believe in sharing the keys of our knowledge and our lived experience to unlock opportunities, both at work and at home. So that's why I'm especially honored to welcome our guest today. We have Veronica Cardenas, our immigration lawyer. She's a close connection to one of our authors. And when we knocked on her door to say, hey, we're thinking about doing an event like this, unfortunately, we haven't seen something in our community, especially in HR. She jumped up and said, how can I collaborate? How can I help? And it's because of leaders like her and many others that have raised their hands, that are using the skills, the knowledge that they know, that we'll be able to come ahead as a community. Veronica, if you haven't read her impressive bio, she's got a lot behind her and she's been very busy. So please send her a lot of thank yous and hearts and love in the comments, because as an immigration lawyer right now, there's a lot that she's handling. She's, as I mentioned, immigration rights attorney, founder of Humanigration, a powerful practice rooted in dignity, protection, and empowerment. But what makes her perspective so unique is that she was also a former ICE prosecutor, someone who's seen the system from the inside and now dedicates her work to dismantling it from the outside. So she's not only brilliant at law, she's deeply compassionate in how she educates and empowers others. And you're in for a very powerful and practical session today. So I'd love to bring to the stage Veronica. Veronica, thank you for being here with us and really just spending time with us, as we try to learn, grow from one another, and be present with each other here. My panelists, I'm excited to get our hosts on here too, if you can't tell. But Veronica, thank you for making the time and the space to be here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So before we jump in, we're going to get into a lot today. We have a lot of time over the next, I'd say, hour or so with each other. We're going to bring in other speakers in to help give you a little space to breathe too. But really wanted to get to know you a little bit first, right? If you wouldn't mind sharing really what has prompted you to do this line of work, because it's not easy. And I'm sure you work with many aspiring lawyers out there. So would love to see, if we can hear a little bit from your story.
Sure. So when I went to law school, I was the first in my family to graduate college, go to law school, and I kind of fell into working for Homeland Security. A friend of mine was interning there, and they said that they were looking for interns, and so I applied. And at that time, this was in 2008, Homeland Security was still a fairly new agency. It was created after 2003. And so when they were created, they split from the Department of Justice, which houses the immigration judges. And Homeland Security didn't yet have a honors program. So the year that I graduated in 2010, that was when the honors program was first created. And I went that route. And after seeing, I started under Obama. So There was a lot of prosecutorial discretion. Yes, immigration law has never been perfect. It has been harsh, even at the best of times, but there was still prosecutorial discretion. And once Trump came into office the first time around, he changed immigration laws, policy, so much that it never went back to the way it was, even after Biden's presidency. And we're seeing now a continuation, a more sophisticated approach, where Trump has really attacked the immigration laws, policy, and the way that people are treated. And so when I was working with Homeland Security and I was first seeing all this under Trump 1, I wanted to create a system where people who were going through the process understood it and the lawyers also understood it. Because if there are any immigration attorneys out there, most of us practice alone. Not all of us go to big firms. And so the community is so important, because just like you're building this community for Latinas Uprising in HR, lawyers need the same thing to see what's trending, what's new, what changes there are, how to support one another. And so that was my goal when I left, creating that community for lawyers and also for the people that are going through the process.
Again, when we met you, Veronica, I was like, this was a match made to happen. So I hope we can continue to stay close to you and all that you're building. Know that you have us as a sister community to help support you as you're building as well, because there are times where we'll be contacted for employment attorneys, right? Not so much immigration, but like you said, it's a small space and there's a lot that we can do if we keep working together as one. So thank you again for making the time and sharing the space. Today, the agenda pretty much that we have for us to talk through is we're going to talk through our home and personal rights. We're going to talk about workplace and HR responsibilities. And then what a lot of us want to get into is hearing so much information from everywhere is how do we create action, advocacy, even maybe emotional support. And I know our hosts have been dying to speak with you. So I'm going to get them on the line. We're going to go ahead and start with Denise. Denise, I'm going to bring you to the stage. I'll remove myself, but thank you for being here as one of our ambassadors of Latinas Rising Up in HR and an HR leader. I'll let you go ahead and take it off with Veronica.
Thank you, Priscilla. Hi, Veronica. Hi, everybody. My name is Denise Bray. I am a senior HR generalist, and I'm based in the greater Seattle area. Before I launch into some questions that we have for Veronica, I do want to share one of the reasons that I'm here, felt drawn to be part of this, is I really believe in empowering ourselves and our communities, and knowledge is a very practical tool where we can help our communities and ourselves be able to have a plan in place, and it just helps us navigate challenges a little bit more efficiently with a plan in place. You know, knowledge is power. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here. The first portion of this call will be about home and personal rights. I think that's something that is top of mind for everybody. And with this, we'll be able to cover, you know, knowing your rights, being able to build a personal plan, and also ultimately be able to prepare yourself and your family should the unexpected happen. So that said, Veronica, and thank you again so much for your time. Can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the legal obligations and rights that individuals do have should ICE show up and knock on their door, as an example?
So the first thing to really understand is that immigration officers only enforce immigration violations. So if they're going to a home, they, just like any other government official, needs to have a warrant signed by a judge, a federal judge, to enter that home. In my time with ICE, and I was there for about 13 years, the amount of times that they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge is like probably less than 1%. So the chances of ICE knocking on your door and having a judicial warrant is very low. What they're relying on is consent. A person can consent to anyone entering their home. And the way that they can obtain that consent isn't always straightforward. It's not like, hi, hey, I'm ICE. Can you open the door for us? It's what they call in law a ruse. It's kind of like a little white lie, like, hey, there's Amazon packages here. They're for you. Can I come in and give them to you? Or, hey, I just saw someone like sideswipe your car. Is it your car? Can I come in? And so they are relying on a person to open the door and say yes, or just open the door and kind of like let them come in to get into the home. And we've seen in videos, once ICE has that piece, they're not going to be very gentle in the way that they do it. It's a lot of shouting, a lot of pushing. And so my advice is always, if you're not expecting someone and someone is knocking on your door, ringing your doorbell, a lot of us have cams now, look through that cam and don't open it, because if they have a warrant, they're coming in anyway, whether or not you open that door or not. And once you open it, it's a lot harder to say, I, even though you can and you have the legal right to take away that consent and say, I no longer want you here. I ask you to leave. Please leave. It is a lot harder at that point to get them to leave. So that's like one of the important parts. But there are parts of the home where that could potentially, they're like semi-public, like if a mailman walks to deliver mail and put it in that part of your house, like if it's on the garage or like the sidewalk, parts that people can walk through, those parts ICE can be there. You can ask them to leave, but those are parts where they can potentially be. And then apartment places are important too, because a lot of us do live in apartment buildings. And the way apartment works, if you're just like renting a room in that apartment, someone else can't give consent to go into your specific room if you're renting a room. Although the owner of the apartment or anyone else living in the apartment can give consent to common areas. So they can say, okay, you can come into the kitchen or the living room, but not a specific room.
Interesting that I think, I mean, admittedly, that's the first time I've personally heard that piece about apartments. And if you share a home, that's really good information to know. Thank you so much for sharing. And then similarly, when we think about the potential of there being a knock at the door, we are seeing more and more in the media as an example of bystanders trying to intervene in situations, in raids, with individuals that are being apparently targeted.
Mm-hmm.
What about with bystanders? What rights or considerations do we have there?
Okay, that's a great question. So ICE does have to identify themselves to the person that they're arresting. If you're a bystander and you're trying to record and you're like, who are you? Why are you arresting him? Technically, ICE does not have a legal obligation to tell you, I'm such and such officer and I'm arresting him, because they don't have that obligation. And as a protester, though, you do have the right to record, as long as you're not and if it's a public space, like if it's a private space, that's going to be, a gray area. But if it's a public space, like if you're out on a street or if you're like witnessing a raid, you're witnessing someone like ICE go and break someone's window in the car, you can record as long as you're not interfering with that arrest. So keeping a safe distance, and maybe the officer will stand in front of you, and you could just say, I'm not interfering, I'm just safely recording. Because I feel like expressing what you're doing is really important, because things that we see can be misconstrued. They could, like we saw with in Newark, New Jersey, how ICE officers got aggressive, and then they were saying like the congressional representatives had assaulted them. And so always voicing what you're doing is really important. Like I'm a safe distance away. I'm nowhere near you. I'm not like obstructing this arrest. I'm exercising my right. That's important to narrate. And it's important. I know it's scary, and I know that it's a very uncomfortable position to be in, because ICE, we see them arresting people who they say are obstructing arrests, but it is really important to document those moments, because these are all things that are being challenged in federal court, whether someone's constitutional rights were violated, because we know that ICE can't target someone because they're speaking Spanish, because they look Latina or Latino, or because they're standing outside of a Home Depot. Those are not reasons to arrest someone. They need to have probable cause that a person has committed an immigration violation. And you can't tell that by the way someone looks or speaks. And when we document those instances, like as a community, we can either submit that into evidence in court to show what actually happened, and more importantly for public opinion, because I think the way out of this era of Trump and the way he's doing immigration is really the public community standing up and saying, this is not the America that we want to live in. And having that documented is so important to forward that narrative so that we can all see what's going on. So, no, they cannot arrest you for recording in public. And if they do, documenting everything that has gone on. That way, if your rights were violated, that's something that can also be challenged.
Thank you. And one key takeaway from me there is making sure we vocalize our intent, making sure that we state clearly why we are doing what we are doing. Thank you very much. I think that's something else that hasn't been as publicly stated. So I really appreciate that. And then lastly, in a worst case scenario, somebody is caught up in a raid or detained. How can we, with our family members, with our loved ones, with our close friends, how can we build an emergency plan? What tools, what topics, what subjects do we need to cover so that we are prepared in the off chance that does happen?
Yeah, and these are really hard circumstances to prepare for, but I agree that being prepared is the best. Number one, always having a copy of the person's file, their documents, because I've seen so many times a person goes into a check-in or they go to work and they have the papers with them because they think it's safest. And then when they get arrested and ICE detains them, all of that documentation is now with ICE. And ICE, good luck getting that information from them. So it's always great to have a copy. And I tell people that they should have a copy on like a digital file. That way, in the case of emergency, if anything happens, they can forward that to someone who's going to help them get a lawyer. Documentation, I mean, is like a person's A number, 9-digit A number. So if they have a work authorization, getting a copy, like copying that work authorization, their social security number. If they've had any encounters with ICE or Homeland Security, like if they cross through the southern border and they're seeking asylum, all of that documentation is good to have. And then also things that would help them be released, because once a person is detained, the first thing an immigration attorney is going to try to do is get them released from detention. And so having information about whether they paid their taxes, like the tax transcripts, that's always important. Having letters from the community, an employment letter saying that this person worked in this place from such and such dates, and that this is what their salary was, because once a person is detained, they have the right to get a bond by a judge, and the judge is going to be looking at whether that person's a danger to the community or whether they're a flight risk. And so community letters, if the person has children in the US, if they have US citizen children or any family members, that's all going to show their ties, why they wouldn't flee. The fact that they've been paying their taxes, that's all great stuff to have, because these things happen very quickly.
Okay, thank you. So it really is a multitude of platforms, different ways that we can, different pieces of documentation is what I'm hearing. Everything from our own immigration information to even things like taxes, where we don't necessarily think of that as some kind of evidentiary proof, but good to have on hand as well. Do you have anything else that we have not covered that you think is really critical for us to know as a community moving forward from a personal rights perspective?
I think we've covered it, just really documenting if you see an injustice happen, to document that, to talk about it. Because if we don't stand up for our rights, no one's going to say, okay, let's just stop everything that we're doing, especially ICE. So.
Perfect. Veronica, thank you so much. What a pleasure to be able to speak with you on what is a very timely but necessary topic. Thank you very much for your insight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. And then I think I'm going to be handing the reins over to Katie. Hi, Katie.
Hello.
All right. I will let you all connect. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And Veronica, I think we have you queued up for a quick little water break, just in
Oh.
case. But hello, community. My name is Katie Ryan. I'm an HR anthropologist based in Chicago. I want to take a moment to thank my beloved husband and my family for their support today. It's been 45 days since the news broke out about the ICE protests in Los Angeles. I was in my hometown that weekend. I'd flown in the morning of the infamous Home Depot ICE raid that was happening in Paramount. And I still remember driving down the highway and seeing patrol cars fly down the Alondra Highway exit towards the protesters. And the reality check in that moment, I was looking at it from an HR lens. That worksite has ICE at their doorstep. And I started seeing the scenario as a workplace issue, and a whole new flurry of questions started coming to mind. Is this a workplace trauma event? Are employees safe? How do I protect and prepare my workplace for an ICE raid? The tensions around immigration enforcement in our country today have the potential to cause deep psychological trauma to our work sites. And HR is likely caught yet again between the politics of employee safety and organization compliance. Remember that HR's collective strength is that we humanize decision making for business operations. And so we can and we should be the ones to talk about how to prepare for this rising risk of an ICE visit at your doorstep. Because the reality is that immigration customs enforcement has always been a compliance risk for HR. It was just an extremely low risk that didn't require an intricate plan in the event that ICE came knocking at your front door. We are now in a situation where the risk scenario has changed. ICE may not knock on your door. They may be in their own vehicles in your parking lots, surveilling their intended targets, which are your employees. And so you have to start considering what the safety risk is if employees react to such an intimidating threat on your work site. My hope is that we can take steps to prepare for that risk, prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And that we can also support employees about their workplace rights so they feel safer coming into workplaces, to enable organizations to prepare how to react in the event you have that visit. And never forget that in moments of injustices in our society, activism has influenced irrevocable change for our workforce rights. Our employees are the activists that can shape the outcome of worker protections. So today, we are going to help you feel empowered with a strategy. Just like businesses have had to plan for other risks, COVID-19 pandemic, active shooter risk, business continuity plans, ICE raids just got added as another safety risk to plan for. So in this next part of the discussion, I will have Veronica on the stage where we're going to talk about workplace and HR responsibilities, how members of our HR community can prepare protocols in the event of an ICE visit. Hello again, Veronica.
Powerful story.
Mm-hmm. I thought we could start off by acknowledging the variety of our modern workforce, because whether you have a small employer that is in one location or an employer with multi-state compliance, even those global teams, you now have in the mix on-site, hybrid, and remote staff. And so we have all of these maneuvers as employers and as HR professionals to keep in mind when we have to assess risk. So when it comes to employer preparedness, what are the key components of a security protocol to prepare in the event of an ICE raid at one of our locations?
Okay. And for this, there's so many different aspects of this. And I'm not an employment lawyer. So I'm going to specifically talk about where ICE can search, what documents ICE can search, and how we can really contain that to make sure that when ICE is going to a workplace, that they're complying with the law and that the employers are making them meet their burden before they're searching documents, before they're searching locations. And so with a
The suspense. We're going to give Veronica a minute. She's a busy attorney, so we may have all of those calls. But while we wait for her to rejoin, I do want to mention that depending what level you may be at as an HR professional in your organization, one of the key things that all of us have felt the easiest action step is to review I-9 documents. Reviewing them in case of an audit, which has been the most likely probable cause and excuse for an ICE agent to come knocking on your door. That's the low risk I'm referring to. I-9 documents and audits can only take you so far. It's about also understanding what other rights you have beyond that simple, cordial request. All right, and it looks like we have Veronica back.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So yes, the I-9s are important to have in order because ICE will review those. That's a separate branch under Homeland Security Investigations that they're in charge of reviewing, fining employers if those documents aren't in order. But what I really want to touch on is how much can ICE just go to a place and search the property or search records. And similar to the home where people have rights from ICE to just not walk in without a judicial warrant, the home is like protected the most because as a society, we believe that in the home, we have the most privacy that we should have. The employment place is a hybrid. There are some parts that are private where you can expect privacy, and there are others that are not. And so having those clearly delineated is a really great intention to show ICE, right? Like, and not just ICE, any government official who wants to come and search the property. So, for example, if there are areas where it's employees only, you either need a badge to swipe in, or it's clearly marked that people from the general public can't just go into those areas, that an ICE officer will most likely need a warrant to go into those private areas. And so marking that off, like, do you want to give me an example of like different workplaces so I can like?
Sure. I'm going to think about manufacturing sites. It's
Okay.
let's take a manufacturing site that has a shared wall between the manufacturing facility and the professional offices.
Okay, so that's a good one. So if the manufacturing floor is open and anyone can just come in and out, then that'll be a space where ICE can also come in and out. Anytime that the public, like if I'm shopping or if I'm a customer, if I'm a client and I could just walk in, then ICE is also going to be able to just walk in. If the professional offices have like a swipey badge or something where it's like clearly only employees can enter those spaces, then ICE will not be able to go into those spaces unless someone opens the door and says, okay, you can come in. With consent, though, only certain people in that business area would be able to give consent. So having a plan about what to do if ICE is knocking on that private space, if you're just an employee and you don't know like the hierarchy or who can give consent, you can ask for, employees should be educated to ask, like, can I see your badge before I let you in? If not, hold on here, let me get my supervisor, and getting someone who can attend to ICE, leaving them outside. And then at that point, asking, do you have a judicial warrant to come in? Are you looking for something specific? Arrest warrants and search warrants are different things, but they're both signed by federal judges. So an arrest warrant should be specific about who they're looking for. Like we're seeing now, like at the Home Depots, right? They're just going there because that's a public space, asking everybody for their identification and then arresting. Cases like that, I know that they're happening in Los Angeles. A federal judge in Los Angeles, and ICE was sued because of that. And a federal judge said that that is discriminatory. You just can't go up to people and ask them for their identification because they're standing outside of a Home Depot. They would need an arrest warrant stating we're arresting, VC, we're arresting MC, and name the people that they're arresting. Similarly, for a search warrant, they have to describe the evidence that they're looking for. They have to know that it already exists and not just going and trying to find what they can to then justify an arrest or to then justify evidence. They can't work backwards. They have to do their investigation. So for the person who does have the authority to let someone in, to know what a judicial warrant looks like. And I have a PowerPoint presentation and I will share it so that you could share it with your members so that they know what the difference is between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant, because a lot of times ICE will have their own warrants, but ICE signs that themselves. They're not going to a judge to get this information. And then even if there's no swipe or lock between these doors, if it is an employee only place, to have a sign on the door so it's clearly marked that not everyone can be in those spaces.
Thank you. I know a lot of our community will appreciate samples to look at and compare. It's called learning opportunities.
Thank you. I want to add one thing too, because even if you're standing in a public space where ICE can walk through, let's say like they're at, the raids that they're doing on farms and stuff like that, a person doesn't have to speak to ICE. That's also a consensual interaction. So if they see you on the warehouse floor and they're like, "Can I have your identification? What's your name? Where were you born?" I'm not answering your questions, and that is a full sentence, full stop, and they shouldn't proceed from there.
I think that is, it looks like we have on the screen a sample of the judicial warrants and ICE warrants. Veronica, do you want to maybe talk key things here to look for?
Yeah, so one of the key distinctions at the very top in the box in green, you'll see United States District Court. Those are all of our federal courts. Our federal judges sit under the district courts. And if you look at the one on the right, which is the ICE warrant, it's going to say Department of Homeland Security, warrant of arrest. ICE doesn't issue search warrants. Those have to be signed by a judge. So they may want to pass this off because only an officer has to sign this, the one on the right. So that's the first thing to look for. The second thing at the bottom, like who's signing the box in like yellow, that will have the federal judge's name on it. Whereas the one to the right for Homeland Security, that'll just have issuing officer. So if they give you this ICE warrant, you can say, well, that's not a proper warrant. And if they push, well, I'm going to need time to speak to my attorney. Do you have a card I can take? We'll call you back, and not letting them in.
Do employers have the right to make copies of either of these warrants presented?
They should give a copy.
Oh, okay. So it stays retained with the employer. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to pivot to the next question, which kind of comes down to who do we need to involve in developing a response plan? I'm hearing a lot of tips in terms of what HR professionals can do, which is kind of doing the audit checks to make sure that these are valid requests. I keep thinking of a scenario of a well-intended employee trying to put an ICE agent in an enclosed area that's safe, but leaving them unattended could be enough of a reason in a maybe not a restricted area for them to wander off, and now you've unintentionally given consent. So who would be the right members to involve in developing this response plan?
I think that's going to be up to each organization. I think I'm not best suited to answer that, but it has to be like a hierarchy. So whoever, I don't know, like the owners, whoever can make like those legal decisions, and they should be closely connected to an employment lawyer to have an organizational plan. And that plan should be distributed. Like who can give consent? Because the employees need to be trained on that. Like if Katie's the one that gives consent and Katie's not there that day, who's going to be number 2 to give consent? And what's the protocol if ICE does come? You're going to request the warrant. If they don't have the warrant, then you can't come in. And then going to, funneling that information to then a lawyer, because if ICE has that as a target, they're not just going to walk away. And so having lawyers from the beginning would be the best thing, so that then ICE is now dealing with lawyers and not just like barging in.
Yeah. I do see we have another shared resource up on the screen. Let's see, Veronica, you want to quickly take a look to see if there's anything missing that we want to highlight here?
Sure. So ICE, if they go to those public areas, like let's say like they're walking in and it's like a waiting room and there's a person in the front, like a receptionist or someone at the front, they can technically be there if there's doors and they can't go out, but that doesn't mean that the person who's working there has to speak to them. They can say, I don't want to speak to you. If you're ICE, can you please leave? And then unless you're under arrest, you have the right to walk away. So if that person feels uncomfortable and there are like designated signs, employee only, or some place with a where you need to swipe to walk in, you can leave. And then I would say, I think the best course of action is having that plan of who is designated to allow people to come in, who's going to make those decisions, so that if that does happen, I don't have the authority to let you in. I need to speak to my supervisor. Please wait there or wait outside while I confirm or verify.
Yeah, these are actually great tips, Veronica. Sometimes it's best when we hear from a more neutral third party of what are actually things for us to prepare. And you're right, this response plan will look different for every organization because every organization is different and assessing how high is the risk as well. We talked a little bit about rights, maybe just as we're in our communities or in our home. And I know Denise mentioned a little bit about the bystander response or how to best prepare for that. In workplaces, let's say that we do training with management, with supervisors, even with employees to let them know what their rights are in event of the situation. If they're recording content in the workplace, is that something that should be provided directly to the employers, connecting them with other resources, or is this kind of a case by case basis?
I think it would be a case by case basis. I think that if there was a blanket policy by the employer about what to do with those recordings, because the employer's interests are also different than the employee's interests. Like the employer wants to make sure that they're not going to be fined a whole lot of money, right? So there's going to be some type of cooperation, especially if they come in with a judicial warrant, right? They have to. And so I think that would be a case by case basis. I would actually prefer that to be a case by case basis. That way, no employee feels like what they're using is then going to be turned around to be used for the intention that they didn't intend for it to be when they were recording it. So,
Yeah. You give my favorite response from attorneys. It depends. Okay, so I know in moments of a scenario and emergency, there's only so much we can do to prepare for it. That's when natural instinct takes over, and we hope that we've reviewed enough of plans to remember the critical things we can do that are in our control. So let's talk a little bit about what happens after an ICE visit. What is the employer's responsibility after ICE has left their premises?
I think that would be more of like an employment law question, because they may be looking at fines if they violated, like if people were working without status or expired work authorizations, they could be fined in that scenario. So ICE would let them know, and then for them to negotiate, that usually they are able to negotiate down fines. But I think it's more like of an employment law question or like an HR question, like how to then bring the community together to feel safe again, because that is something that's really difficult when we're seeing these large raids happen. People who are being arrested who, who have status, like we've seen people who have status, provided identification, and were still arrested, and people who didn't. And then I think in those scenarios too, like if you are the employee, as an employee, if you were detained, even briefly, I would reach out to a lawyer too to see that if everything that was done lawfully by the employer. Like if ICE actually had the authority to come in, and you would want to review that too, because if a person is wrongfully arrested, someone should be held accountable, and it might be ICE and the employer. Like you would have to review all of the information in that point to see. And so obtaining those, obtaining that information as to what happened.
Yeah, it's reminding me a little bit more of like, how do you get back to safety? If What if that safety wasn't even in the workplace? You got caught up in it and you're in the shuffle. So if it is an employee, is that where, in hypothetical scenario, the employee would reach out to you as an immigration attorney?
I think in that case, they would reach out to an employment law or civil attorney, because at that point, then the person's rights are being violated, and there may be other like state and local laws that are being violated,
Mhm.
specific to each state. So, like in New Jersey, an employee's rights are going to be different than in California. So, reaching out to someone who practices in that area to just review everything and to see if there's any violations. Oftentimes, you know, people will come to me not for employment law, but for immigration law and say, I had no idea about that. And so you never know until you seek that advice from someone who does. So I think it would be a great starting point.
Yeah, it comes down to knowing your rights. It's so convoluted depending who you are, what your status is. It's not clear cut. It depends. But it's the most we can do as HR professionals is educating where we can within the limits of the workplace. We can be very sympathetic to the situation happening because for a lot of us, it's hitting really close to home. But we're one person, we're one of maybe a bigger team, and our responsibility in those situations is maybe more of educating employees of their rights.
Right. And like for employees to also understand, like if it feels wrong, it may very well be wrong, in the law. So getting an opinion from a legal professional is the best case scenario to like, I know HR serves its purpose also, but being empowered to get the information that you can and then also seek out other types of professionals to make sure that you're covering all the angles.
Yeah, yeah. I Before we got ready for today's call, I remember taking a look on your website and looking at all of the resources and interviews you've been doing. So I encourage members in our audience that if you haven't had a chance to look at Veronica's interviews, contents, publications, take a look, take some time if you can to sit down with loved ones, relatives, friends, whoever it is, to take a listen to some of the actions that you can do to prepare for a visit, whether or being stopped out in the streets. I think there's a lot of concern with the recent approval of the budget for ICE, which was what approved for $28 billion right now. And so that approval is step one. It's more about what's going to happen when you have the resources, and is that really going to come in affect more of workplaces that we never thought were at risk. I am ready to wrap up here and hand it over to our next panelist. But Veronica, is there anything else that we want to share maybe about workplace
No,
responsibilities? We're good.
no. Thank you so much, Katie.
Of course. All right. So Veronica's going to go on a quick water break. And onto the stage, I am going to invite Adeli, another panel member. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm honored to be one of your hosts for today's important conversation on immigration. My name is Adeli Lopez, and I serve as the Vice President of Human Resources for a nonprofit organization working remotely from North Carolina. And I'm also a proud member of the Latinas Rising Up in HR. I'm here not only as an HR professional, but as someone who believes deeply in the power of advocacy, empathy, and action, especially during moments of fear and uncertainty and silence. This topic is personal. Whether it's a colleague, a loved one, a member of our community, many of are impacted, directly or indirectly, by immigration policies and enforcements. As HR leaders, we often find ourselves in the front lines, not only managing policies, but supporting people in the most vulnerable moments. As we continue our conversation today, I want to introduce a topic that sits at the intersection of action, advocacy, and emotional support. Because when immigration related raids or scares happen, whether directly or indirectly, our roles are as HR leaders become profoundly human. This new next segment focuses on how we can show up for our people with courage and care. These are hard questions, but they're the ones that move us from inaction to meaningful support. So let's dive in. And most of these questions, I know, Veronica, I know you mentioned that you are not an employment attorney, but from your professional experience, we want to support our employees, like I mentioned, or like Katie mentioned, when employees are in the most vulnerable moments. What communication strategies and resources can employers use to rebuild trust and provide clarity after an immigration-related raid or scare?
And to like the breach of trust, I think being proactive and having a plan communicated to employees about, in the event of a raid, in the event that ICE comes, this is the plan. um, I know that there are organizations that are not so well prepared, and when organizations are not so well prepared, then a lot of things, there's room for a lot of errors when it does happen. So I think starting there, having that level of communication about what the plan is.
Awesome. And um, another question that we have for you are like, what are effective ways to support employees' emotional well-being and reduce fear or anxiety in the aftermath of traumatic events? And this is based on your experience witnessing some of these rates.
I think that having the resources, like I think it's both like a proactive and then like the defensive side, right? So proactively, um, having resources like this, like I have the PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share has a lot of resources about like being proactive about the situation, and then to the extent possible by like whatever state you're in the laws that allow it, um, offering services like counseling services and things like that that'll be private to the employees.
Right. And those resources would be very valuable to our community here as well. And this last question is one of the questions that even I struggle with. Some organizations are having a really hard time taking a stance, especially as HR professionals. We usually can't take a side in this issue. How can HR leaders navigate these situations where their organizations are very hesitant or unwilling to acknowledge the impact this is having on employees?
I think that's an excellent question, and
Mhm.
that is where we are right now. It's very like it's we have to tiptoe around this issue because people are scared to take a position. um, and so I think uh, framing this issue as this is one of legal rights, just like um, people had mentioned from the panel, like just like we prepared for COVID-19, just like we prepared for other, like a natural disaster or something, we now need to prepare for an ICE raid. And I think that that is something that's perfectly, understandable, because in the event that it does happen, what is the plan? Even if people are citizens, they should still know what their rights are. Like, I would feel uncomfortable if ICE just barges in and starts like asking me questions. I hand over my ID, I tell them I was born here, and they arrest me anyway. So it's not just a non citizen issue, an immigrant issue. This is an issue that's affecting everybody in the workplace, because, citizen or not, if that violation happens and there's that violation of trust, well, then morale and everything else is going to go down. So I think being able to frame it in that way, this isn't like us making an issue out of nothing or picking a side. These are what our employees are asking, and these are the rights that they should know, or we should at least give them the resources for it.
Thank you so much. And yes, I agree with that. Personally, I have a son who's 21 and doesn't have any documentation on him or ID, so I continuously encourage him to have something on him because it can happen to even US born citizens.
Yep.
Mhm. And those are the questions I have for you. We are going to wrap us up. Priscilla will be coming onto the stage so that she can share some resources and topics we have. But personally, Veronica, I want to thank you for coming here and answering all our questions. This is the portion that we will have now for a Q&A or live Q&A from our audience.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for coming.
Thank you, Adeli. Oh, Veronica, you have been the star of the show today. Again, thank you for making the space. And I'm glad we gave you a couple of water breaks because there's a lot of really good information you shared. I think at the end, I was writing notes like crazy, and I'm grateful for AI because they're going to help us wrap up a couple of things here too. We'll be sure to put our eyeballs on it as well, though. But I'm making sure that you have your documentation on you. Don't just opening the door to anyone, really asking the questions when you're at home, for instance, and somebody knocks on your door. I loved how you said, are you expecting someone at home, right? Is there someone that you're looking to actually have there? And I even before all this was working off of my video camera outside. So even more so now these days. I really appreciate how you mentioned the workplace and just what we should be doing. And thank you for being so transparent too and saying like, this is what I would recommend, this is not. Because at the end of the day, I think all this insight, I really wish we could get a USB and just literally download everything. I feel like we kind of did that with your presentation that you shared. I was like, oh my goodness, in the backstage, I was going through a few of them. I do have a question for you as we gear up and wait to see questions from our audience. So if you have a question, please throw it on live, put it in the chat. We'll address it. You mentioned in the workplace, so I'm just going to put our perspective there and how ICE agents cannot, they can go wherever it's public, right? And sometimes, unfortunately, you can't distinguish what is or what is not public in certain workplaces. And so I've heard things, and you may not know this, but you may, again, just insights, but I've heard things of what if you place signs that say that it's private, right? Or you put different signage up to say that this is for employees only. And so I was curious if that's something that you've seen or you've heard of. I know you're going to come back on. So whenever we get a chance, I'm happy to rephrase the question again. But I have heard through the grapevine, that many employers have been given insights of putting different signs up in different areas, so that way it distinguishes what is private backspace versus not. So I was curious on your perspective for that. So I'm sure you'll come back, Veronica. We're going to have you removed for just a second while you get back on stage again. And so there's other things. We have a wonderful, wonderful community of Latinas in HR. Would love to hear any other best practices, insights that perhaps you have experienced or that you've done in your organization. While we're bringing a subject matter expert here with us today, I believe that all of us are in our own worlds. So the more we could share that, the better. But Veronica, I'm going to bring you back up. I don't know if you heard me, but I was mentioning about how sometimes we've been hearing certain employers that are saying, oh, put up different signage that says this is private or employee, it's employee only space. So then that way it really distinguishes. No one can go back there, and if they do, right, whoever, right, they're crossing private property at that point. So wasn't sure if you heard the same thing or if that's just kind of going through the grapevine. I do have you on mute. I can't unmute you for whatever reason.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's on your side. Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah, that is definitely on point, but you don't want to just label things and label everything. It also has to function that way. So if it's really a private space, labeling that like employee only, but then using that entrance as an employee only entrance, because if you're just labeling things and you're not actually using it that way, and when ICE comes and there's just like clients or public coming in and out, then they're also going to be able to use it that way.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It was one of those things we heard about. The other thing, we have got a couple of other questions, so we'll see if we're able to answer them. For I-9 purposes, if we have temp employees, how does HR address that? I'm going to give that a minute. I would say we would have to keep following what we've always done in our HR practices. We don't want to change anything. But when it comes to ICE and having them visit us, I think we would just have to, again, to your point, Veronica, if they have a warrant of some sort and they're asking for certain information, we would present it based on if they're providing the correct legal documentation for us to show it. I wouldn't show anything, I would assume, right, if we don't have that correct paperwork.
Right.
I love it, Sonia. She wrote, "The more we know, the stronger we become. Thank you for this session." All right. Okay, we'll give it a minute. Everyone's just saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Veronica. You're nailing it out of the park for us, and really sharing, if anything, validating or helping share new insights. Because again, this is all, we're learning as we go. And for you, Veronica, to being in your space, and things are changing all the time. How do you stay on top of all these changes? And what recommendations do you have for us who are trying to breathe above water as well? Any insights, apps, websites? What would you recommend?
Oh man, definitely. I have Google alerts because there's certain things that I'm looking for, and so that is, I found the best way for me to get the information, because literally, I go to sleep, I wake up, there's a new policy change, there's a new law change, there's a new something, and so I put my Google alerts to like immigration updates, immigration law, so that I am looking at things as they come through, and then I guess like just in my legal area, I'm plugged into like bigger organizations where they're keeping track of these things. Like the ACLU is a big one, and they play such an important role in, right, like immigration lawyers are kind of at the ground level, and we're making sure that like people's rights, like we're going through it, but ACLU and other organizations are at the top, like they're bringing forward class action suits like the one in Los Angeles, like these are the discriminatory practices, you need to stop. And then you need the lawyers at the bottom like representing each person also. And so just being plugged into larger organizations, and then also balancing that with self-care, because it gets so overwhelming, so stressful, and knowing when to unplug, because if we're not healthy, we can't fight the battles that we're being called.
I'm going to put you on the spot, Veronica. What things do you do for self-care? Because you have it like, I was telling the ladies, like, she's got the fire like all around her, right? And I mean, I can't even imagine what you're doing for yourself. So how do you unplug? What are you doing?
I'm a very spiritual person, so I feel like my meditation, and I'm still like learning this too, but like meditation is really important to me. Listening to like classical music, so that it like like detox, and then also like when I come into like strong energy,
Mm-hmm.
just like reclaiming my power back after that, because there's so many times where it's like, like I was in immigration court and you hear about like all these arrests happening in the court,
Right.
and I'm like, God, I don't want it to be one of my clients, because what am I going to do, right? Like you're thinking about like, how am I going to protect my clients? And there was an incident where it happened, and that's to my client. I was downstairs, and then it's someone else, like another lawyer who was a newer lawyer, came down, and like after those, you feel heavy, like you feel like there's something I could have done, maybe something I should have done. And after those incidents, like taking time for myself and like releasing that, because I'm just one person, I can't fix the world, and releasing what isn't ours to hold.
Mm-hmm. That's really important. I think a lot of us in HR relate to that too, because these employees, we get very close to them. We get to know their families. We get to know the ins and outs, probably sometimes more than their own households know. And you're right. It's just so important to be able to balance that, because we will drive ourselves, up the wall if we take everything on. But I think that's also part of our power, right, of being able to support others. So it's that intricate dance, that little waltz that we do. But thank you for sharing that, because I tell the ladies all the time, we're constantly trying to find ways to recalibrate what we're going through, because we're, at the end of the day, we're all real people, right? We're going through real things. I loved how Katie shared her personal experience, and I was telling the ladies, this is a really tough call for us, because it hits each one of us so personally, at work, at home, I was telling the ladies, I have a family member that actually went back to Mexico last week because of the fear of everything going on. And you've got a lot of families that are making these decisions so that they don't end up in these centers, right? These detention centers is what they're calling them right now, where the situation is bad. It's really bad, and they're making decisions that makes it's better off going back to the land that maybe not home, but now is their new home. And it's important for us to know, again, know all our rights regardless of our immigration status. That's the beauty of our country. We have that, and I hope we can keep pushing forward for those changes so that way we don't lose that. Right? It's scary. That's what made us so beautiful, the diversity that we have here. So, well, with that, any last walkaways, tokens that you'd share with us, Veronica, that you want to remind us of?
I just want to thank you and your organization, because I feel like we're all fighting the same battle in different spaces, and it's so necessary to come together, because these conversations are so inspiring for me also to take away, because we all need each other. And like I said, like, for us to get out of this, it's going to be as a community. We all need to do our part. And so thank you so much for inviting me, for giving me the space, for learning more about your organization, for sharing, your members and this important conversation.
We're going to have you back for sure, even if it's in a quieter space. And I'm gonna tell you more about how we balance our wellness too. I think you'll love it. Maybe you'll want to join us for that one too.
Yeah.
Katie, Adeli, Denise, I brought you back to stage because, again, wanted to thank each one of you personally and publicly. It's ladies like these that I want everyone to see and know, that raise their hand, that are living their purpose, that are living and sharing everything that they know. And this is, like you said, Veronica, this is how we make a change. We are not rock stars and like famous people, although Veronica's pretty famous. I mean, I do have to show that out there. She's been on a lot of shows, but sharing a lot of great information. But what I do want to share is that we each have something to do and something to give. And if we take that little granito, that little seed of what we have, and water it, right, little at a time, and share it with those around us. I mean, this is how we make change. This is how we keep pushing for that change. So thank you, ladies, for saying yes, for joining me in this and activating this first conversation. And I have a feeling we're going to need more. I already see a few comments were coming through of like, hey, I have questions, a little more detail that we'll have to go through another day. Veronica, we may keep you employed for a lot longer with some of our questions. But thank you all so much for making the time. Please stay connected with us. You can find us at latinasrisingupinhr.com. And again, we look to be a place where we are here, a safe haven for Latinas in HR, to be able to be both the personal and professional side of what they do. So then that way we can just be stronger people at the end of the day. So have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Thank you again. And we'll be talking very, very, very soon. Have a good one, everyone. Hasta luego.